Now in Photoshop, the first thing we're going to do is bring in all of our comps. That's our light passes that we did earlier, marmoset renders, iRay renders, keyshot renders. So I'm going to select all these in here and just dump them into Photoshop. And there's some more maps I want to bring in here. So not just the comps themselves, but there's also some really useful maps from our bake map. So I can go in here like our curvature map, displacement map, ambient occlusion, opacity, and ID. I can dump all these in here. You can even use your thickness if you had like a subsurface scattering. And then I'm going to go in here to window. We don't have subsurface scattering for a truck, but if you had that for what you were working on. Window, arrange, float all in windows. And now I can start dumping these into one file here. So truck comp, I'm going to use as my base. I'm going to double click this just to make it a not a background layer. You know, let's double click this and call this keyshot. And you know, while I'm doing this, I'm gonna hit Control minus. I'm gonna shrink this down because we're gonna be dumping a bunch of layers in here, so I want you to see what I'm doing. For the opacity, Control A, Control C, go back to our comp layer, go into channels, click plus, paste that into that alpha, and now I can like control click this alpha to get this outline and use that in my layers here. So for example, on Keyshot, I can add a opacity layer, and now using that ZBrush mask, it cuts out our truck perfectly. Now, if you don't want that, you can just go in here and say delete layer mask, and there we go. But at least we have that as a mask available. We'll go ahead and close this window. Here's our ID map. I'm just going to Control A, Control C, or if you want to, you can just Shift drag this right in here. We'll name this ID. We're going to use this to select individual areas. So we can hit W, and if you need to, you can long click on this and choose your magic wand tool. But if you use this, you can go through here, and if you have contiguous turned off, anything that's pink or anything that's red or anything that's blue, you can very quickly select that. Alternatively, you can go through here and you can say select color range. Just go through here and select a color, change that fuzziness in here, and then I'll go through and select all the reds basically. So let's go ahead and close this. This we're going to use for a lens blur later for depth of field. So let's go ahead and do another Control A, Control C, and we're going to post this. Just do a click the plus button for new alpha, paste that right in there, and then close this out. Curvature map, we can use this for dirt buildup in Photoshop as we're doing our comp layers, just like we did in Painter or Marmoset, but also we can use these edges, these white edges, for edge scratches or edge wear or highlighting edges or sharpening edges in our Photoshop comp. So we'll just go ahead and, again, paste this into another channel over here, and we can grab this as we need it. Ambient occlusion we can also use as a channel mask. But in this case, we can also use it in our final comp. So I'm going to copy this out of here, go back to our layers, make a new layer, paste this. We'll call this AO. And you're going to see if I just drop this to a multiply, boom, we have ambient occlusion as well. Here's our iRay render. So I hold down Shift and just drag this in here, say yes, close that. This one doesn't really match up that well. So let's hit F to go ahead and fill this up, and we'll go ahead and hit Control plus a couple times. And I'm going to hit Control T, which is going to allow us to transform. And also I'm going to drop this opacity down so we can kind of see where this needs to go to line up. So I'm going to kind of put it right in the middle here, hold down Alt, and just pull in from the corners and just try and match up this shape. If you need to, you can also use your arrow keys to nudge one pixel up, down, left, or right. If you need to, again, just pull these corners out. Just trying to get this to match up. Again, not super elegant. I just couldn't find a better way to make sure our cameras matched up in iRay or Marmoset, but good enough. So we'll go ahead and hit Enter. We'll change this back to opacity of 100. And you know, if this looks a little bit off, we can always just go back in here and just... All right, we'll call this one iRay. We'll hit F to go out of this mode. Again, Control minus to shrink this down. Reflections, since we took this out of ZBrush, it'll match up perfectly. So again, just Shift drag this in here. This is our Marmoset render. Hold down Shift and just drop it in. And again, this one, we need to match up as well. So again, we'll drop this opacity. You can also change the blend mode. You can do like a blend mode of difference if that's easier to kind of see. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, depending. And again, just kind of shrink this down. Use the arrow keys to nudge around. back to 100% opacity. Call that marmoset. Hit F twice to go out of that mode. Control minus shrink this down. Here's some light. So hold down Shift and drag it in here. This will be our light top and light left. Of course, you can always render out way more lighting passes in ZBrush. You can use the ZBrush to Photoshop plugin to render those lighting passes for you like we did earlier in the videos. But for now, we'll go ahead and leave it alone. So a couple things here. The lights you're going to probably want to put on screen. And you don't have to keep both of them. You know, here's the light top and the light left. You're also going to notice the lights are affecting the background. If you don't like that, again, go into Channel, your Alpha 1, if you just Control click it, and then go back to your light left and add an opacity map, you can Control click this opacity map now, go back to light top, add an opacity map, or you can go in here and say, just right click and say delete layer mask on both of these. And then you can say, hold down Control and click both these layers. Hit Control G to put them in a group. Call these lights. And then on this, you can go back in your channels, Control click your Alpha 1, and then put an opacity map right on your lights. So now everything that goes in the light folder gets separated out. So you can see how quickly and easily you can add just baked in lights, also baked in shadows like we did in earlier videos if you want to render out shadow passes. The only thing with a shadow pass would be, just like the AO, drag this to the top here, you're just going to set that to multiply. Now there's a couple more things you can do here. So for each one of these lights, like we have the light left and the light top, if you want to warm one of these up, you can select it, go in here to adjustment layer, go ahead and say hue saturation. And we just want this to affect light left, right? Because if we do it now and we say colorize and then hue shift, it's going to affect everything underneath it. If we hold down Alt and light link, or link this hue saturation to just light left, now just that light left is going to be warmer. So you're going to see that left light's going to kind of warm up a little bit. It's a little bit sunnier. And same thing for the top. Now if you want to do it to both, just take that hue saturation, drag it up above this group, hold down Alt, and link it to the overall group. Actually, nope, that's not going to work. So we'll drop it right here under light top. We'll just we'll just drag this onto the plus sign. We got two of them now. We'll throw this over to light left and light link that. So now light top and light left are both warmed up. Same thing for the AO. If you wanted to make this AO, just drop a hue saturation on top of that. Alt link it, turn on colorize, and now your AO map can be, you know, red or cooler blue, if that's the look you're going for. And again, it's getting a very nice cartoony look through here. Now, one thing we're not getting is the ability to see through our windows, but we can steal that. We can go through here and let's turn off everything. Just click and drag down until you get down to this key shot. I want to steal these windows. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my ID map here, select it, hit W, select all the pink areas. Remember, contiguous is turned off. Turn off our ID map, go to key shot, hit Control C, Control V. That'll paste these windows right here. I can drag those above my marmoset render. And now when I turn both those on, I've got windows here. Now, you're going to see I have, this is all painted red in here. So if I want to turn that blue, again, let's go to our ID map here. And you know what? I like to have my ID map up at the top so I can just turn this on and off as needed. So with this one selected, oh, I can't select through there. And you know what? That's okay. I think what I'll be able to do is I'm going to Control click these windows. On the windows, I'm going to go through here and do a hue saturation. Drag that down above my windows, hold down Alt and link that. And I'm just going to hue shift the window over until that the red parts turn blue. And one more thing I like is that key shot contact shadow on the ground. And luckily, since I have my key shot down here at the bottom, this marmoset car, again, if I turn this off, the marmoset car doesn't have a drop shadow, but key shot does because it's using that shadow from the real geometry. Of course, in ZBrush, I could also set the light, render that out, and save that as a shadow pass, and then I would have a floor shadow as well, but that's perfectly fine. This reflections later, if I drop this over my marmoset, I can turn this on. I can set this to a different kind of blend mode here. And again, I want to make it so it's only going to, hold on, control just where my car is. So we'll go ahead and control tap that alpha, go in here and set an opacity map, and now the reflections is just here. Go through here and you can change the blending mode. I think they do like a color dodge and then just take the opacity of this layer down a bit. You can just dial it in just to get a little bit more reflections in your car paint if you think it helps. If it doesn't, don't bother with it. You can also isolate this to just different areas of your car, but I think an overall reflection pass is probably fine. Now we've already got dirt accumulation on here, but we can also use our AO map for that as well. So let's go ahead and drag your AO map down here to duplicate it. And I'm going to throw this at the very top. Go ahead and hold down Alt and link that hue stat back to my original AO. This AO map will hit back to normal. I'm going to do Control A, Control C. Go to our channels here, make a new one, hit Control V. I'm going to hit Control I to invert it. Now everywhere where it's white is where dirt would accumulate, all these little pockets in here. So if I control click this now, those are my dirt areas. And I can go ahead and put a dirt map on here. So let's hit Control D to get rid of all that. Let's go down here. Let's add a new layer. We'll call this one dirt. And in fact, you can just go on the internet and we'll go in here to tools, size, large. I'm just looking for just a dirt texture I can drop in here. Let's say open image in new tab. This looks fine. Copy image, right click copy image, go in here and just paste it right in your image here. This AO copy we don't need anymore. So there's my dirt. If you want to, you can take Control T. You can scale this up or scale this down. This looks like a plenty large image. We're not working super high resolution, but I think this will work fine. Now we want to limit this dirt to just the crevices of our image, right? So we're going to go back to our channel, control click this AO, go back to our dirt layer and assign that. So now just where our AO is now where our dirt's going to be. Now of course on this dirt we may need to go in here and add a levels. Hold down Alt and link it to our dirt. You can go in here and add some contrast to that dirt, make it a little darker. Even go through here and add a hue saturation. Hold down Alt and link that again. You can drop the lightness down, change the overall hue of it, desaturate it if you want to. So again, just manually adding more dirt in Photoshop if you need to. Now, this dirt is actually replacing all those colors. You're going to see it kind of lightens up a lot. Just remember, you can always switch this to multiply if you want. You can also drop the opacity down. And just like in Substance Painter and Marmoset, if you Alt tap this mask, you can see what it's actually creating. So if you ever at any point want to, you can hit Control L and you can say, you know what, this dirt's a little too broad. Just go in here and change these parameters here so we can really isolate those dirt to the crevices in there. Really crank up that dirt contrast in here. So now when you hit OK and you click back on this level, now your dirt's a lot more contrasty. You can also grunge it up. You can paint on this, whatever you want to do. Now you can also do the same thing. If you go in here to channels, here's my curvature map. So I can use this to find my edges. So you know what, let's rename this to edges. This will rename to dirt. This will rename to depth. And this one will rename to truck. So now we go in here to edges. We can hit Control L. And let's go ahead and bump up the contrast. I'm going to take this left arrow and scoot it over, and because I just want to grab my edges when I use this map, so I can hit OK. So now what I can do is I can control click this, and that's going to select all of my edges. So all sorts of different ways you can use this. Let's hit Control D. Let's at the very top, we'll just add a new layer in here. We'll go ahead and choose maybe a very light blue. Hit OK. Fill with our foreground color here, and then go back to our channels, control tap that edges, and then make a layer mask here. So now we've basically highlighted all of our edges. We can go through here and drop that opacity. You can also change the blending mode. So this is a way, again, it's just kind of a cartoony look, but if you want to go in here with like a vivid look or a vivid light blend mode, go ahead and drop the opacity down. And then, remember, you can always select this. Go in here with your brush and you can brush out any areas that you don't like. as long as you have black, you're painting black on this mask, and you can just brush it out. Now if you wanted to put a paint layer on top of this, again, you just add a new layer, or heck, might even be better, select this marmoset layer, go ahead and drag it down on the plus sign to make a copy. Let's add a hue saturation to this. I'm going to desaturate it, maybe lighten it up a bit, and I'm going to use this as white paint. I can go back in any other program and I can render out a white paint or whatever I want to use if it's a completely different material, but since this is close enough, I think it'll do the trick. So I'm going to link that to this marmoset copy here, and on this marmoset copy we'll call this white paint. Go in here and add an opacity mask, then hit Control I to invert it. And now wherever I paint with my brush, if I tap X, it'll put white in there. So Alt, left and right is going to allow me to change that, and then up and down is going to change the hardness. So I'll say 100% hardness. So I can go through here and I can paint in white paint. So if I want to go through here and just, and for that I might turn on smoothing quite a bit. So we can go through here and we can like paint in, you know, pinstripes on the car. And to sell this a little bit more, what I can do is I'm going to double click this layer. I'm going to turn on bevel and emboss. And we're going to say outer bevel. Change it to down. So now it looks like that paint is kind of sitting right on top of there. So we can hit OK. If you notice your emboss is maybe the lighting is going in a weird direction, just again double click this bevel and emboss. You can literally go in here and change the angle of that emboss. And now that I see this, I probably need to do up and up angle and then just put the light where the light's coming from. That looks a lot better. So now when I go through here, now I can go through here and I can paint in white paint layer on top of this. And if I ever want to grunge it out, I can just select kind of a dirty alpha, tap X, and then I can just go through here and I can just kind of paint out where I don't want it. And again, you've got tons of renders. You've done all sorts of stuff. So if you want to use your iRay render, you want to use your keyshot render, if I go ahead and duplicate this off and put it up at the front, you'll notice we got a lot of cool light effects and stuff. So you can, you know, paint on top of this one and change it and do all sorts of light passes and all that good stuff. But anyways, here's just a really easy way to kind of get just a render from a couple different sources, match them up, do a little Photoshop work. You can always go through here and make whatever changes you want. And on top of all this, so now that let's say we're pretty much done with this, I'm going to say Control A, Control Shift C, Control V. That's going to paste all these together. And then if you just really want to make some quick and dirty adjustments, we can go in here like the burn tool. And it's like any places you want more contrasty, you can just go in here and just kind of use the burn tool. Make sure you have protect tone turned on so it doesn't get it too muddy. And then it's opposite of that is you can go in here to the dodge tool and you can go through and any places you want to kind of punch up or maybe kind of bloom out, you can. Actually, speaking of bloom, let's go ahead and get rid of this layer. We spend a lot of time on like doing post effects and capturing all that, but you can just do that stuff manually. We can literally just add a layer for it, or we can do Control A, Control Shift C, Control V again. It's just pasting merged. So we have this entire thing here. We're going to go in here to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and just crank that up. Let's go ahead and set this, I think, maybe to color dodge, just so again, we're just trying to get that bloom in there, so it's really going to lighten up those areas. And the reason I'm doing this is because as the colors change, the bloom color is going to also change. So now I can go in here and again, we'll just add an opacity map, hit Control I, and then hit B to go to brush. And this time, I'm going to make my brush very soft. I'm going to hold down Alt and then up and down. We're going to change that hardness to 0. I'm sorry, I can hit X to paint white on this black mask, and wherever I paint white, that bloom's going to show up. So let's go ahead and say, you know, the opacity and flow, I can type 2 to set the opacity and then Shift 2 to set the flow. So again, we're just dropping that opacity very low, and wherever we have a very light color where we might expect some bloom, we can just go right along our image here and just add a little of that bloom. And it'll actually pick up like, okay, this is yellow. It's actually going to bloom yellow from that color dodge. You can go inside your image here as well and kind of bloom it out just a bit. I'm being a little heavy-handed, and if you want to, you can tap X to go out of paint it black, and then you can just knock back some of this bloom a little bit. Now, if you'd want to as well, you can also go in here and just add a new layer. Hit B to go into brush, and then you can just sample these lighter colors. You can literally just go in here and just paint, you know, a little bit of bloom here, maybe a little yellow. Let's really do a very light yellow and just go in here and just kind of paint a little bloom on there. And on top of this, we'll call this, and we already talked about, like, you can go through here and do your burn tool to add some quick contrast to these areas, although since it's only showing up in the bloom areas, that's not going to help so much. So let's do another Control A, Control Shift C, Control V. This we're going to go through here and we're going to add, you know, a little bit of contrast to some areas, and then go back in here and say Dodge tool. Kind of, you can use this to even push your bloom a little bit. And then here we can make a new layer. We can say set this to, you know, color dodge. Go ahead and rename this. Hit B, go ahead and sample this. You can go through here and you can paint different areas. And this is what I might use for like subsurface scattering. I might choose like a ruddy red and then just paint right along the core shadow. And that would kind of dial in just a hint of subsurface scattering. Of course, in this case, you know, I don't need subsurface scattering, but that's just something I might use for a subsurface scattering look. But for this, you know what, it kind of gives it some interesting color breakup, but you know, you probably, let's go through here and select a yellow. You can go through here and you can warm up some areas and cool down some areas. Same thing if you want to add like an overlay. You can go here and sample. Kind of punch some of these areas up. Now, if you are kind of going outside of the truck and you don't want to, remember, always go back to the channel, hold down Control to select your truck, hit Control H to hide the selection so you don't have to look at it, and now you won't go outside of the truck. It'll keep you confined in here. So again, you can use overlay to go through here and kind of maybe punch up some of these areas if you want. Now, if you want to do a depth of field, what I'm going to do is just do one more Control A, Control Shift C, Control V to paste merged. And we'll call this depth of field. We'll go in here to filter, blur, lens blur this time. And the source you want to choose is going to be depth. So that's our depth map, our displacement map. The one that goes the closest to the camera is white, and then the furthest away from camera is black. And now we can just go in here and the blur focal distance, we can just choose, you know, set focal point as pushed. So we can just go through here and just click on our image to set that focal distance. And then if we take this radius and crank it up, you'll see a little bit more. So if I click over here, that's where the image will focus. If I click back here, that's where it's focused. So generally speaking, unless you want to do like a tilt shift, where you want to select something in the middle and have it kind of blur along two planes, I usually pick like, you know, wherever I want that center of interest to be in here, and then take this radius down. It can be pretty subtle. You don't have to make it like super crazy or anything like that. Well, it's fun to look at, but you know, we'll take this radius down to maybe 3, just so that back end just goes a little bit out of focus. We'll say okay. And now if I turn this on and off, you'll see just a very subtle change there. But anyway, here's our composited image. We're just kind of messing around in Photoshop, having fun, but you can see how easy it is to go from a ZBrush shot, and again, no UVs, no low res, no bake maps. All we had was a camera view, render some passes, throw that into Marmoset, throw that into Keyshot, throw that into Painter, whatever you want to use, however you want to use it, toss all that into Photoshop, have a cool concept, and you're off to the races.